Hello and welcome to the Engerati studio here at African Utility Week. I'm joined now by Dean Villet, who's the Professional Services Director at Itron. And Dean, sorry about the pronunciation of your surname. I've got problems with my V's and my W's, so it's a genetic defect, not intentional. Dean, welcome to the studio, and I hope you're enjoying the event. We just finished an interview with your colleague Imran where we were talking about smart meters and the rollout of that. And before, when we were talking a little bit, you were saying that one of the big issues for the utilities as well is revenue collection. You know, because you don't really want to put in a huge amount of money unless you're assured of the revenue back of it. It is a business at the end of the day. So what are some of the things that you're finding in that area?
Okay, so one of the businesses that we're running at Itron is a revenue assurance business. And I was actually asked in an interview last week about what surprises me about the industry that we work in. And I had to actually think long and hard, having been in the industry for a while, about what surprises me. And the one thing that surprised me was how few utilities have actually taken a revenue assurance view of the world and taken it really seriously, addressing these issues at the highest level in the board. What we're finding in utilities is that service delivery is becoming a major challenge. And specifically in the African utility, in certain areas where we're running at losses of up to 30%, non-technical losses of up to 30%, it really is putting the sustainability of the industry at risk.
So those losses are directly tied to the fact that the revenue from the end customer is not coming in.
Correct.
Right.
Absolutely correct. So one of the solutions that was touted in the kind of mid-90s was to move towards prepayment because of the issues around billing and collecting billed revenue. But the issue with a prepayment meter is that it doesn't have a meter reader looking at it every month. So it sits in the customer domain and they have great opportunity to tamper. And sure, smart metering is something that you can use to identify and do some analytics on and try and pick out where the losses are happening. But revenue assurance is needs a much broader approach in terms of making sure that you're addressing some of the social stigma around non-payment for services, and as well as getting the kind of energy management, energy losses understanding into the utility staff.
Because isn't there I mean, when you start talking about stuff like this, like non-payment and a revenue assurance, you can't help but go into some sort of socio-economic discussions about, okay, well, at what point is it a right to have energy, or okay, electricity maybe less so, but water, where's the threshold there? What are the models? So how are you guys looking at different customers, different customer sets, and are there any innovations and solutions where you can say, well, we can deal with that? We can do earlier interview. Someone said, well, there could be a basic allocation. This is your basic allocation and things like that.
Absolutely, and we've actually had to wrestle with a number of these issues. I know in about '98, there was a big implementation of prepaid water meters that took place in Johannesburg, and there was a massive outcry because, as you well mentioned, electricity maybe not, but water, you could argue it's a basic right to water. So the guys have come up with very innovative solutions around trickle feeding for water, so that once you've run out of your allocation, it doesn't stop, but it'll trickle feed. And on the energy side, in South Africa specifically, we have a free basic electricity grant. So everybody gets 50 units free, depending where you live. It could be 100 units if you qualify. And they have looked at those socioeconomic things. But broader than that, the losses don't all occur in your poorer communities. The losses occur across the board. In fact, your more sophisticated theft is happening in the commercial sector, as well as in your wealthier neighborhoods.
And I would imagine that would kind of make sense because in the commercial sector, your energy use is more intensive.
Exactly.
Therefore, anything you save has got an
On the
effect on the
bottom line.
margin and the bottom line. So, what are some of the craziest things you've seen or you've been exposed to that you can talk about?
I can tell you hundreds of stories. I think one of the worst was we found a brick foundry that had been attached to the network and everything, but the paperwork had been lost. It had never been loaded as a customer and had been drawing power for probably a decade without ever getting caught. And the first monthly bill, the real bill that the brick foundry received was 75,000 rand, which is about $9,000.
So they've been saving $9,000 a month every month for 15 years.
Exactly.
Yeah, that man's up. Yeah,
Yeah.
I suppose you can't do a back payment there, can you?
Well, the legislation in South Africa does allow us to go back 3 years, but it usually ends up in a negotiation as to how much you can actually recoup.
Right. Okay. And so how with the approach of demand assurance, I mean that is a great example, but that can still. Does that solve the issue of paperwork being lost and because there's still a human element in all of this.
Absolutely.
We can't just connect it all up.
Yeah. So what we are strong proponents of at Itron is taking an energy accounting approach to your revenue assurance. So understanding how much energy you're pushing into an area, because as you say, there's this human element. Paperwork will always get lost at some point. But if you know exactly where your losses are occurring, and you've got nice ring-fenced areas that you can do an account around, this is how much energy we pushed in, this is how much we invoiced or collected, then it gives you far more pinpoint efforts.
Well, at least you can see where a problem might potentially be, and then you can get more forensic about it. And it's like
yeah, because the concern and the thing that surprises me is that revenue assurance is fairly haphazard in most utilities that we see. It's a bunch of people doing ad hoc kind of inspections on houses and factories, but there's never been a really analytical big data approach to revenue assurance, and that is what we're trying to push now.
Why is that? Is that a skill set issue, or is that because you kind of without the big data element, which is now coming in, you just file all of that under too difficult? I'm not going to knock on 3,000 houses or whatever it is.
It's exactly that, and it's twofold. I think you've got a capacity issue in terms of, as you say, the hands to run the thing, but you've also got a skills issue. And one of the things we're seeing in the utilities that we deal with is that they have very good strategic plans, but very limited ability to execute those plans. And obviously that is good for us as service providers to the industry, but not good for the industry as a whole. So that is what we're working on. So we've actually got a learning university where we bring people through, we train them up on what we believe is a good methodology around revenue assurance, and send them back into the utility space so that we can make a difference.
Because that then becomes kind of more sustainable as well, because as you spread those skills out and everything. So in terms of again, just segueing back to the event, because it's where we are, and it'd be a shame not to talk about it.
In Cape Town.
In Cape Town as well, which for me is wonderful because the weather back home is absolutely horrible.
This is our winter.
Well, listen, I'm moving. I'm sold. What are some of the things that you've heard, at the event that kind of excite you, and where you're like going, oh, it's great that this discussion is happening, or I'm seeing this for the first time?
I think the thing that I saw this morning, which was Professor Eberhard's presentation on the inclusion of independent power producers into the grid. It's something that we've spoken about in Africa now for probably 20 years, and had the ability to execute very little. And finally, we're starting to see a big move in that direction, which is really heartening, because as you spoke to Imran about earlier, the generation constraint that we have on the continent is significant. And the more independent, distributed, embedded generation we can get on the grid, the better it is for everyone.
This concept of rural microgrids and all that stuff, which is actually something we should do in developed countries as well. But that's just me making things sound simple, which is probably a big old problem. But listen, Dean, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking the time to come to the studio. And thank you as well for watching. Again, lots of presentations, lots of interviews, lots of case study content to download from Engerati, so please do use all of that. And if you have any feedback for these interviews, there's a massive community on Engerati of about 11,000 industry professionals. Go ahead and ask them. And thank you for watching.
Thank you.